What's up, everyone? How's it going? I hope you're all doing great. Thank you for being here. And if you're hearing my voice, it means that they made the mistake of letting us get to Friday again. So, of course, as usual in the Friday episode, I have some stories for you. I have some other stuff to talk about. And the first thing that I want to get into is that, as we know, Ozzy Osbourne unfortunately passed away at the age of 76. Now for me, I was a big fan of Ozzy Osbourne, and I didn't talk about it a whole lot on the channel because I didn't feel like it was related a whole bunch, but then somebody commented, I think it was last week, Space Ghost 9969 says, I have a special request. Can you tell the story of the recording of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in the Haunted Castle? And for me, that is a perfect opportunity to talk about, how much I like Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, and how much I enjoy hearing stories about the paranormal, the high strangeness, and all that. So I figure that we'll get right into it and start talking about that. So before we get to the whole Haunted Castle thing, we have to backtrack just a little bit. After they recorded their Volume 4 album, Black Sabbath, the band, was pretty physically, emotionally, and mentally drained. At the time, they had a very heavy touring schedule, they had personal struggles, they had substance abuse issues, and everything like that. It can really just put a damper on you, and really just have you at, a low point in your life. So the band was suffering from severe writer's block. Geyser Butler is quoted as saying that the band was absolutely and completely exhausted. Tony Iommi, the primary songwriter then, found himself really just having a bad time. Tony Iommi is quoted as saying, everybody was sitting there waiting for me to come up with something, and I just couldn't think of anything. So I believe what happened there was that they canceled the rest of their tour, and they kind of took a bit of a break. Now, the band also made the decision to return home to the UK. So the band went from trying to record in Bel Air all the way to picking a haunted castle to record their new album in. They chose Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire, England. And I also believe that the band chose to rehearse and record in the armory or the dungeon area. And Tony Iommi himself has said that as soon as they got there and he came up with the riff for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, everything just started flowing. It's like the logjam had been cleared. But you might be wondering, where does the supernatural come into all of this? Well, Clearwell Castle is known for being quite haunted, and each band member said that the whole place had a very creepy vibe, very foreboding and eerie. They would constantly feel like they were being watched, and, since they're a group of guys, they played pranks on each other relentlessly. So with the creepy setting, the eeriness, and the constant feelings like you're being watched, and not only that, but your best friends and bandmates pulling pranks on you, it left drummer Bill Ward so rattled that he apparently started sleeping with a dagger for protection. So while at this castle, and dealing with the things they were dealing with, they were walking down this corridor after rehearsing. And Tony Iommi said himself that they were walking down this long corridor and a full-body apparition, like a black figure, began to come toward them. And they're wondering, who the hell is this? There's nobody else that's supposed to be here. And then this figure turns off to the right into the armory. They go down and they look into the armory, and of course, there's nobody there. They had just seen a full-body apparition. I did read other stories, and it said that one of the more popular spirits is of a monk, so I kind of wonder if that's what they saw maybe, or, in true Black Sabbath fashion, if they saw something darker. But of course, that wasn't the only thing that happened at this place. So, in the room, the dungeon area that they were recording at, Ozzy was sleeping on a couch. They had a big fire in this fireplace. I think it was a fireplace. Anyway, they had a big fire. And somehow, sparks began to roll out. Coals began to roll out. And that caught the room on fire. Of course, Ozzy woke up and got out of there. And I believe it was that same day that happened, is when they saw the figure walk down the long corridor and into the armory. Now, of course, as two separate incidents, these sound pretty disconnected, but given it's Black Sabbath, they were in a haunted castle, and these events happened in the same day, you gotta wonder, was that spirit responsible? Or was it just two chance occurrences? Now, as they were recording in there, it seems that the band got to a point where they were pulling so many pranks on each other, and so much stuff was happening, that they didn't know who was doing what. So then, they ended up having to leave at the end of the day, and then sleep in a hotel or something and come back to record. Or as Ozzy Osbourne so eloquently put it, instead of the Lords of Darkness, we were the Lords of Chicken Shit. And for me, I think, haunted or not, going to a castle to record a metal album is the coolest thing. I would definitely want to go there, even though it's like a wedding kind of place now. But back then, it wasn't. It would be so cool to go there and just go into the dungeon, into the armory, where this happened, and just play and see what comes out. I generally don't talk about it too much, but I do play guitar, and I do mainly play metal, and I do know a lot of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne riffs. And you also might think that something like that is where the supernatural occurrences around the band stop, but that's also not true either. There were occurrences before this, and after this, and during the life of Geyser Butler in particular. But just before I get into that, I would also like to mention that I believe that Deep Purple recorded the album Burn at the same castle, and I thought that was a little ironic, considering what almost happened to Ozzy Osbourne and what happened to that room that they were in. Even if it's all just coincidence, it's still pretty cool, or kind of cool, kind of scary, kind of everything in between, you know. And I think I may have said that it was a 17th century or 15th century castle, but it's actually an 18th century castle. Just trying to get my details all lined up here. But kind of pivoting off of that, I'm going to go into the experiences real quick that Geyser Butler had. He says that when he was younger, especially when he was a kid into a teenager, he always loved reading. It says that he never gone a day without a book. Now, since he was brought up fairly strict Catholic, he was very interested in the spiritual world as a whole, so he used to read about that. And all of this fascination, I guess is the best word, with the spiritual world, kind of started when he was 4. He says that he felt a presence in his room, and when he looked up, he saw this orb that was hovering above his head. But it wasn't just like an opaque orb, like sometimes you'll see ones that are flying around in footage of, haunted places or whatever, or dust on the lens or whatever. In this one, he could see things in it. He said that in this orb, he could see the future, and as he was looking at it, it just disappeared into the fireplace. And ever since then, he would have these dreams, and then he would wake up, and it would happen that next day or the day after. He says that when he was in his teen years, a lot of things would begin to go missing, almost like he was being, kind of played pranks on, taking his stuff and hiding it. Now, during this time, he decided that he wanted to learn about the other side. Like I said, he had that interest in the supernatural. He started reading about the devil. He started reading about what all that entailed. So he was reading up on astral planes and all that kind of stuff. And then he says that the experiences just got weirder from there. And all of this kind of leads me into the story of the first Black Sabbath song, also called Black Sabbath. So, as you may or may not know, in the late 1960s, the band wasn't called Black Sabbath, they were called Earth, and they played the blues. This was very popular at the time in the UK. And of course, they rehearsed across the road from a theater. This theater would often show horror movies. Then, they changed their name to Black Sabbath after the Bela Lugosi film. And that kind of lays the groundwork for this experience whenever Geyser Butler was a little bit older, but still in his younger years. This was taken from the liner notes of Sabbath's 1997 CD, Reunion. And what Geyser Butler says goes like this. I've been raised a Catholic, so I totally believed in the devil. There was a weekly magazine entitled Man, Myth, and Magic. that I started reading, which was all about Satan and all that kind of stuff. That and the books by Aleister Crowley, Dennis Wheatley, and especially The Devil Rides Out, which was meant to be a cautionary tale, but read like a handbook on how to be a Satanist. Then he says that he had moved into this flat that he'd painted black and put inverted crosses everywhere. And then he says, Osmy gave me this 16th century book about magic that he had stolen from somewhere. I put it in the airing cupboard because I wasn't too sure about it. Later that night, I woke up and I saw this black shadow at the end of the bed. It was a horrible presence that frightened the life out of me. I ran to the airing cupboard to throw the book out, only to find that the book had disappeared. After that, I gave up all of that stuff. So let me know what you think about all those stories from Geyser Butler, from Tony Iommi, Ozzy, and Bill Ward. Do you think that they really encountered these things? Do you think it's more about the mystique of the band? Of course, let me know in the comments. And for myself, what's your favorite Sabbath album or favorite Ozzy Osbourne album? Also let me know down in the comments. And now, as usual, I have some stories for you that I think you'll find pretty terrifying, like I did. And this was sent in a little while ago by Anonymous. He says that he was a hunter, and this took place in early November. He went to Sweden with his brother to hunt elk. They went in together on a cabin to rent from the association. They found this really good spot in the woods, a very open bearing. Then he lays down for a couple hours. But strangely, there's not really any game around. After a while, they decide that maybe it's just best to try the next day. They all return to their cabin, they get their gear off, they try to go to bed. After this, nothing happens until around 1 o'clock in the morning. They notice a sound from outside. Now, it started as something kind of far off, kind of jolts you out of your full sleep, but you're still kind of half asleep. And then, another noise startles the hell out of him and his brother. He said the noise kind of sounded like someone took an old metal shovel and was shoveling gravel, or dragging it across the gravel road, or something like that. And then at the end of the noise, there seems to be some kind of gurgle. He grabs his gun, loads it. He tries to see out the window, but it's just pure blackness. He tells his brother to take the flashlight to open the door to the cabin. He turns the flashlight on, and they scout their surroundings. The light stops at the car where they see something. Whatever it is, scares the hell out of them both. He takes aim, and then, just as he's about to fire, something huge and hairless begins to skitter away from the light. It's too big to be a wolf. From what they saw, it was definitely not an animal that they've ever seen before. After this, nothing else happened, but they definitely didn't get any sleep that night. So he says this happened back in the late 2000s, maybe up until 2011. Now, what do you think it was? If I had to guess just from the hairless part, you could kind of guess it could have been a crawler, but it could very well be something else that doesn't want to be seen. Now, if it is a crawler, I know that people talk about how crawlers sometimes have different personality traits, usually based on if they have or haven't eaten. But also, in a lot of these stories that I hear about crawlers, they like to come back. In fact, a lot of times, things begin to escalate with a crawler around, but in this case, they never saw it again. So, was it one of the ones that had just eaten? Or was it something else entirely, because he says it's too big to be a wolf? So of course, let me know what you think it was down in the comments. And next up is a story of a guy who said that he was deployed in Afghanistan. He was combat camera. He also says that this occurred about 3 weeks before Operation Branding Iron. During this time, the night was winding down. The only guards on duty were this guy named Will that he got to be friends with, and a few other guys that he didn't really know or just wasn't super familiar with. So nothing happens until he's woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning by his friend Will. The guy looks scared as all hell. His first thoughts are, this better be really important to interrupt my sleep. Now, Will tells him to get his camis on, to grab his rifle and come outside. He brings him over to the short trench that he was in, and he points. He says, "Dude, look over there. What is that?" Now, of course, the guy who just got woken up is still kind of coming out of his grogginess, but he's immediately shocked awake when he sees, not super far away, are two red dots. Not only that, these two red dots are 7 inches apart based on his estimation. He also hears this distant, low growling. At first, his brain says, "Oh, it's a dog," but then he thinks about it and realizes that dogs don't usually have red eyes. And then he gets thinking about stories of hellhounds that local village people have told him, but it kind of scares him enough that he just nopes his way back to his bunk. The next morning, he's like, okay, maybe it was just other people playing a prank with some laser pointers. Maybe they were just trying to get a rise out of us. Of course, Will isn't so sure, though. He says that there were multiple times where they got closer to where he was and then retreated farther away and seemed to change in height as if it was getting low to the ground and then standing up. Now, these two people never saw those red dots or red eyes again, but about a month later, they begin to hear reports of these strange attacks in a nearby village. The locals there say that it was this massive dog-like creature. Now, apparently, 2 locals were killed trying to defend themselves from this thing. So let me know what you think that was. I know that now we hear a lot of stories about dogmen, about kind of werewolves. I think I even had a story on this channel where it was these weird kind of cat creatures. I think that also just goes to show that a lot of people have this image of Afghanistan in their heads where it's just a desolate desert, and that's all it is. But there's a lot out there that we probably don't know about, and that the locals there probably don't want to encounter any more than they have to. But yeah, that being said, let me know what you think it was. And this last one I have for you right here also leaves a lot of questions, more so than answers. So he says that this is really the only unexplainable thing that's ever happened to him, and that besides this, he doesn't really believe in the supernatural, but he really has no explanation for this. He says he was 15 when this happened. He was hanging out with his friend at his place. It got pretty late, around 1 a.m. Now, he said that his friend wanted to go home, so they started walking back to his house. Where his house is, it's technically in the middle of the suburbs, but his house is on a private road that sits in between the 2 subdivisions. And how it works is that there is his house plus about 4 acres of wooded forest, and then there's another highway, and then it just goes into, natural forest. Now, since that his family owns this section of forest, they have trails all through it, and they have a trail that goes to each of the other subdivisions. So he's walking with his friend on this trail like they have 1,000 times before. They usually stop at the middle part, and then his friend continues on his way and he goes back to his house. Everything was normal, like I said, as he had done 1,000 times before. However, on the last stretch of trail before the main backyard, he sees something. It's a 7 to 8 feet tall, all white, humanoid figure. It's standing to his left at about his 10 o'clock. It has very lanky legs and long arms. It's bald, very pale, and hairless. It completely stands out against the darkness of the night. It looks like that it was just nonchalantly walking in the woods. It turned to notice him as well. He looked straight at it. It looked back at him. And then suddenly, without screeching or anything, it takes off on all 4s in the opposite direction toward the highway and to where the forest just kind of goes on forever. As soon as it was out of sight, he took off running back to his house as fast as he could, locked all of the doors, drew the blinds, and just sat there, shaking in fear and confusion. He says that this happened way back in 2007, and he has no explanation for it. Now, do you believe that this too was a crawler? Do you think it was something else? Like I said, he said it was 7 to 8 feet tall, and seeing something like that just in the woods in your backyard would be absolutely terrifying, especially if you've made those trails, you know those trails, and you've never seen anything bigger than chipmunks and squirrels. I feel like something like that would shake your belief in pretty much your entire worldview. In his case, he says he doesn't believe in the paranormal or cryptids or anything like that. But my only thought when I saw that was, well, I guess you better start, I don't have any other explanation for what that could be, other than something to do with the paranormal, high strangeness, the supernatural, the cryptid, anything like that. He did say that in the years after this, one of his friends who is Native American had said that it may have been something close to a Wendigo, or something similar. But again, sometimes when we see something like this that can just shake who you are, what you believe, and anything, you kind of deny it for a long time because it's so out of place, it's so wrong, that you just don't want to really deal with it, But, yeah, as always, let me know what you think about it down in the comments. What do you think it was? And as usual, if you have a story of your own, or if you would like to support the channel, there are links down in the description. There are super thanks and memberships here on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe, and be sure to join me on Sunday for the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video about kind of blending music and the supernatural with stories about Black Sabbath and the members, and the stories that came after. So as always, I hope to see you Sunday. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend. I hope you had a good week, and I'll see you in the next one.